Okay, so we've been talking about Donetsk. I think we're all very anxious to learn what is happening there. І ми почнемо з паном Тарутою. Скажіть...
Start with Mr. Taruta. Tell us, please, what's the situation in Donetsk? We heard from Mr. Fuller what was the suffering of the people there. What's the situation on the spot, and what is the solution that you see?
Unfortunately, Donbass today is split into a part which is controlled by Ukrainians, and the situation there is fairly calm. The authorities provide for all the needs of the people, and into a part that is beyond our control, unfortunately. And we know why that happened, and that's why there is a lot of suffering there. And unfortunately, we can see a lot of destruction there. Peaceful residents perish because of terrorists, because of combatants, because of those who has come there to bring death and destruction. And they pretend that they are Ukrainian army, and this is one of the scenarios that leads us to a very negative attitude towards Ukraine and Kyiv. This is a part of informational war that is waged against Ukraine. A lot of peaceful residents, civilians who used to be public officials, worked for the law enforcement, who were retired as former law enforcement, have been arrested, have been detained, have been put under duress, and some of them have been killed. Unfortunately, it is next to impossible to ensure due conditions for life. Infrastructure is being ruined and destroyed. Electricity is being cut off on purpose. Gas pipelines, the entire gas industry infrastructure is being destroyed. The terrorists are targeting water filter and water treatment stations just with one purpose: to create humanitarian disaster there and seek friendly assistance from the neighboring state. Therefore, the situation there is tragic, and it is our task to address this situation. It is the task for the Ukrainian authorities, local authorities, and the world of today to give a helping hand to those who need it every day.
Thank you very much.
You've been very active in Ukrainian civil society, and as I said, you're a hero of all young Ukrainians, including my children. They were very excited I was going to meet you in person. Can you talk to us a little bit about what you see the meaning of the Maidan to be, including for the Donbass? And as we've heard from Mr. Taruta, the situation there is complicated and grave.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody, for being here. It's a great honor and pleasure to talk to you. I think it's both very simple and a very complicated question. I can only talk about my personal feelings. So my personal feelings that Maidan it associates with me with freedom. Mr. Fili already very smartly recognized it as a question of values. So I think that basically, if we have two types of values in the world, let's say one, call it safety, another we can call freedom. Traditionally, since earlier times, in this part of the world, Ukrainians accept safety as its basic freedom, and because of historical, geographical, cultural, some other issues, but it happened like that. And in 2004, when Orange Revolution occurred, it was the first time we really began, it was, I would say, a tectonic shift, and we already had value of freedom on the agenda. But I think it was only the beginning, and people were talking about freedom, people were trying to recognize it, to value it, how valuable is freedom for them. But it still was just thinking or just words or thoughts. What happened this year in the Maidan, that people really started to fight for freedom. And that the moment when usually freedom comes, when you fight for it. In the history of all nations who share these values, and actually freedom or dignity, these are just what we call Western values, what unites all, let's say, countries, not only in Europe or Western Europe, but generally who nowadays share these values. So Ukraine started to move towards this through fighting. And many people, as you already mentioned, Mr. Fuller, gave the most precious, the most valuable they had, their lives. And that's the moment when you understand that this starts to be a basic value for some part of the country. I hope and I understand that the more we live, the more people in the country, in our country, share this value, and they choose, they prefer freedom to probably safety or stability. I would here mention that it doesn't mean the stability or safety is bad, but I do think that if you put on the number one on your countdown, say musical term, safety or stability, it doesn't mean necessarily that you will gain freedom. If you put on the number one freedom, it almost every time it means that you also will obtain both safety and stability, probably later. I think that things today are still not irreversible. It still can happen that things can move back. What we do need to do now is to fight. But to fight in different ways. Students should fight in libraries, making their knowledge, their perspective broader, their expertise better, their knowledge higher. Working people or people who work on the working places, developing themselves, making their expertise better, labor productivity higher, politicians on diplomatic battlefields, and some people even in direct battlefields, soldiers with guns. All of them should fight in their own sphere, but fighting for the joint value, which is freedom. Actually, for me, it's a very personal situation, because I, first being as a small student, being a 15, living at that time, it was 1990 in the Soviet Union. First time I went abroad was Canada, and that was when I changed my mind completely, and it made me thinking that value of freedom for me will be the basic value in my life. I'm trying to live like that, and I'm very happy that I can do something that other people share this value, because I strongly believe that it's the only way for the country to become not only free country, but also prosperous, also rich, also stable, also safe country. And I think that Maidan was a very important milestone, but probably not the first, but the most important. It will remain in the history of this country as the very, very important milestone. And it depends on all of us, on all ordinary Ukrainians, but also on politicians, on our leaders today. How will we succeed? And I think that it also depends on how strong guts our leaders have today to overcome all the challenges that we have today, how smart they are to do it properly without doing as many mistakes as some of them are doing now. But I understand that no mistakes has somebody who doesn't do anything. So I wish all of us jointly will use this Maidan and make the memory of all victims having this memory in our minds, we will do that lives of people who already gave their lives for the freedom of this country and who unfortunately are giving their lives now. This price will be very high, but it will be, there will be sense in that. It's the most important thing now. The worst can happen that we'll understand that it was useless. I hope that today, here, and in these 3 days, we also talk about this. Probably it's just general words, but I think that values is the core thing we should start from. Everything else is just is walls, bridges, windows, but I'm talking about basement. And it's freedom for me. Maidan is freedom.
That was very moving, Sviatoslav, and I can't resist saying how pleased I am that Canada was your first demonstration of democratic freedom. We Canadians are very proud. You've referred to the Orange Revolution and its significance, and maybe it's worth acknowledging that President Yushchenko is here with us. I'd like to just ask Mr. Taruta to talk to us a little bit about how Donetsk sees the Maidan relative to what we've heard from Sviatoslav. He put it very clearly, that it was Ukraine's choice of freedom over safety. Is that how it's understood right now in Donetsk?
You know, there were many people from Donbass in Maidan, including in the company that I set up, that I was managing. They were there from the very beginning. Some of my people were trying to organize Maidan in Donetsk, near the monument to Shevchenko. But unfortunately, the situation was absolutely different than here. There was a law enforcement system, militia. These titushkis, they were first there, and they were persecuting all these guys. And the information space of Donbass perceived Donbass absolutely differently. In Donbass, they were trying to get rid of the legal authorities. That was their perception of Maidan. That was their perception of Maidan. I was talking a lot to my guys, to people I know. They understood that Maidan, that is fight for the future, fight for freedom, fight for the possibility to do what you want in life. But main people in Donbass, these are people who work hard. Many of them are unemployed, about 25% of those who unfortunately perceive life differently. That is an explosive mess that then led to the protests. And today, many people say why this did not happen in Kharkiv and Dnipropetrovsk, but in Donetsk, because in those cities we managed to stop it immediately. But you need to understand specific feature of Donbass. It differs from Dnipropetrovsk, which has always been pro-Ukrainian. It differs a lot from Kharkiv. That is very industrial region, which for the last 20 or 15 years has been degrading from the point of view of the possibility to have jobs, to have future. And there are many people who lived below the persistence line, and there were many coal miners' settlements, which you cannot even imagine in other places in Ukraine, where people lived at the verge of poverty. And that was an explosive mass which exists only in Donbass. And this part of people, which was zombied by Russian propaganda, brainwashed by Russian propaganda, they believed always that they can be happy only here, close to the border with Russia. And in principle, if that was a different country, not Russia, they would be willing to get to this different country because they wanted to live better. And that led to the situation when protests started. Political technologists came to Donbass who implemented this operation on annexation of Crimea. They all came to Donbass. It was a good soil. There were many close friends of business, of old regime. These were just like a ground for something else to grow. And there were plenty of protests. We managed to, we were trying to tell them that there are different values, different ideals to which they have to aspire. There's Poland, there's Germany, the standards of life are much higher there, and they need to aspire to these standards. And when they realized that the majority of the population does not really need it, and we have many questions to the members of the councils, municipal councils, district councils, regional councils. Not a single council passed a resolution about annexation from Ukraine. Then the new stage started. It was clear that by protests Donbass would be impossible to blow off, and they started to blow it off by bombs, tanks and weapons. And Maidan, unfortunately, has not stopped. Maidan continues. It continues in trying to achieve the goals that people were talking about in Maidan. People were talking about that in tents at the stage. All people who were there were talking about that. And we have achieved one objective. We got rid of Yanukovych's regime. Now, the reforms, the freedoms, the changes, the transfer of power, that's all our task, which we have to implement immediately in order to improve the economy after we win in Donbass. I believe in that. We will win without changing any borders, without having the enclave there, and that is we are all concerned about what special status should they be. I believe that all the regions should have the special status. We need to transfer the authorities, the executive power from Kyiv to local municipalities, regions, districts, and then people will go to Kyiv not to have some better life or not with protests, but they will be fighting where they live, and they will be thinking about what authorities to develop, what militia to create, and that is our task, which we have to implement as quickly as possible. And this platform is great. Thank you, Victor, for continuing that great platform. Especially now, today, we need it, because the world has to see what is being done in Ukraine, what we all have to do to get stronger, so that our neighbors do not see here economic disaster. But what's happening in Donbass, they need destruction there, not the territory. They want to destroy the main industrial center of Ukraine. That's the main task. And to come out of that with little losses, we need to implement quick reforms. And the reforms will be our main rescue. so that we can attract large capitals to modernize our country. And the model that we are developing now, my team is developing the model of restoring liberated territories. It's not just about restoration, but about modernization as well. And this will be the success. And this way we will get a quick opportunity for economic growth of Ukraine. Sviatoslav.
Sviatoslav wants to react to your words.
I agree with what Mr. Taruta have said, but I have some remarks. I don't want to talk about military issues now. Probably we will talk about it later. But I want to say that 23 years Donbass was part of independent Ukraine. There are many politicians who were responsible in these 23 years, Ukrainian politicians sitting here, many rich and influential people, including you, Mr. Taruta, who were whose word and whose possibilities were very strong during all these 23 years. I just want to say, what have you done, all of you, in these 23 years to prevent the situation that we have today? Because you are completely right. The Donbass people are living in disastrous conditions, in very poor conditions, and especially their minds are, let's say, spoiled, not only with propaganda, because propaganda is a very good thing, but their minds are spoiled with the absolute absence of moral that have been implemented through all these 23 years, but political and business elite in this region. And this is true. And if somebody wants to oppose me, I'm very ready to do that. Because you should go and ask these people, did they see any real piece of courtesy, sympathy, or let's say, did somebody show their or give them an opportunity to express their dignity during all these 23 years? Having said that, I won't be just pessimistic and negative. I will say that all of us should think how to change this. That's, in my personal opinion, this is much more important than to rebuild plants and factories. It's much more important than to rebuild roads. You need to think about their minds and about their dignities, about their. We should give these people any human perspective. And if we continue doing like what we did all through 23 years, not taking care of people in Donbass as well as in many other regions of Ukraine, we will not change anything. You could rebuild school, you could win military the war, which is also not a very easy question, but still, you can easily put new money and to restore roads and everything. But how should you restore the minds of people, which have been spoiled not only by this 3 months, but for 23 years of doing nothing but Ukrainian politicians and business elite as well? You were just using these people, and just using these people.
Okay, and here is Vitali Klitschko, mayor of Kyiv, coming in just in time. Прошу, заходьте.
Luckily.
Я вам віддам ваше місце. Vitali, we've been talking about the meaning of the Maidan. You were involved, and you're now the mayor of the city where it happened. Can you speak to us a little bit about what Maidan means?
Добрий вечір, друзі.
Good evening, dear friends. I'm sorry for being late. It's pretty tense now, as you know. I apologize for the delay, but it's better late than never, as they say.
Many a time we spoke about Maidan, about the events that occurred, about their consequences and their wake, and about the functions performed by the Maidan. You may remember that 1 year ago in Yalta, President Yanukovych had the floor, and I stood and asked a question of him. Viktor Fedorovich, I said, and what if the association agreement with the European Union is not signed? Would you be ready to resign then? And I recall how some people smiled, and that seemed just unreal and nobody believed. But Yanukovych did not sign the agreement, and he did not intend to resign either. But he had to resign because the entire nation made him resign. The West, the East, the North, the South, all Ukrainians together. And all these Ukrainians want to see their nation and the future of their nation and their families and all their friends in a normal country, where they all can confidently look into the future, where they all have jobs, where all social standards are complied with. And we Ukrainians refer to the Maidan as the Euromaidan, and I'm very glad that Ukrainians stood up for their right to live in the European style, in the European environment and conditions, and I'm sure that we shall reach relevant standards. More than 100 people gave their lives in the Maidan. They refer to as the Heavenly 100. They gave their lives for the changes in this nation. And we began these changes. We are resetting the power and the authorities. We embarked upon key transformations, and a lot is to be done yet. Not all are keen about the European choice of Ukraine. You know about the developments in the east of Ukraine. And you know about the external factor and about the financial support and about the weaponry and about auto support for the so-called Novorossiya from out of Ukraine. If it were not for that, this conflict would never occur. It was fully artificial. We Ukrainians will remain united. Here there are many people who have supported Ukraine for many years, who have always seen Ukraine as a sovereign and integral state. And the best answer for all would be the European lifestyle and the European standards of living. And nobody has any arguments against that. And other issues like the identity or the spoken language or historical traditions, all that hardly matters. What matters is our future, our European future. And I'm certain that we'll succeed. Everything began with the Euromaidan, and as a result of all these developments, Ukraine will become the European Ukraine, and we are on the right way. Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm very much impressed by what you're saying about Maidan as the about the Ukrainian choice, about the moral choice of the Ukrainian people. Yet I live in the West, and when the people in the West speak presently about the Maidan and about Ukraine, they usually speak about the inter-ethnic war in Ukraine, the war between ethnic Ukrainians and ethnic Russians, between the Ukrainian speakers and Russian speakers, or the people, as Mr. Fuller said, may be speaking about some geopolitical conflict between the United States and Russia. Why is the rest of the world looking at the Maidan in a different way from the Ukrainians, and what can Ukraine do to better inform the world about what is really happening? Sviatoslav, why don't you begin?
You put a right question, and it depends on many things. First of all, it depends on how different media cover the conflict in Ukraine. You have Western media, you have Russian media, you have Ukrainian media. All of them have their own interests. We should say that, for example, you as an American should know it exactly, that there are so many foreign international, let's say, international things going on every day on the planet, that sometimes people in the world watching CNN, BBC, other channels, they just see Ukrainian coverage of Ukrainian conflict as only one item on the agenda when we have 20 or 25 of them. We should be aware of that, and we should be clear of that. We can't be #1 news each day of the year, every year. Hopefully, one day we won't be on the breaking news and people will talk only about our football team winning the championship or whatever. But it's the first thing, that many countries have their own interests and they try to cover Ukrainian conflict in different way. I don't believe we can talk about absolutely independent media, but all of us are not naive people. We understand that 100% independent media is a utopia. Like, most of them are more or less independent, but all of them have their own views. First of all, journalists have their own views, and it also depends on how counter-propaganda works as well. If Ukraine and Russia are in conflicts, both of these sides have their own view. If Russia's view is implementing more strongly, then we should work in Ukraine to, let's say, to face with it and do something and do our response. So far, I think we are not succeeding very much in this. Secondly, I think that sometimes you should live in the country to understand fully what's going on there. It's very difficult to describe things about values I was talking about, or Mr. Filler was talking about, the history of 23 years of country. It's very difficult. So I think that we only start learning how to fight in this battlefield, and I think that all of us should unite and do something for having good results in international coverage of Ukrainian affairs, and especially of the conflict in the East. And also, it's very important that our government, our leaders, should give very clear signals and very precise signals of what's going on, not having different points of view. It's a very bad thing when one of the authorities has one point of view, another has another point of view. All the authorities it's democracies, they can have different points of view, but generally, talking to abroad, they need to have one point of view, which is a clear message for the world. And I think we should work on it as well. And thirdly, I think that even here, there is a discussion what's going on. And it's true. For people in Donbass, we have one point of view. For people in Kyiv, another point of view. For one politician has its own political view, another has different. Even journalists inside the country are splitting sometimes. So it's also an impact of democracy. Let's do something together and we'll succeed.
Може пан Кличко ще скаже, бо ви, пан Тарута, хочете?
Maybe Mr. Klitschko, Mr. Taruta.
I would like to add that there is no ethnic conflict whatsoever going on in Ukraine. Second, Russian-speaking people are not Russian people. They have always spoken in Russian. Some speak the so-called semi-Russian, semi-Ukrainian. Historically, they have come to live in Ukraine to master new territories and to work in the new factories and at the new plants. Where if people speak Russian, doesn't mean that somebody else should come here to save them from the Ukrainians. When the first protest started, we saw that those were the same gang of thugs who were brought from one town to another to instigate unrest. The situation here and the problem here is totally different. The matter of European choice, the matter of a country having totally different new standards is what it is all about. And our enemies don't want us to live better than them or better than we used to live ourselves. Their main task is to destroy our infrastructure and economy for us to never implement the choice. The choice that was paid by the lives of our best, hundreds of our best people. We all want peace, but not at any price. All the cities and towns that are controlled by the Ukrainian authorities see the so-called Donetsk People's Republic and Lugansk People's Republic as occupied regions, and senior citizens know what occupation means, remembering the experience of the Second World War. So today, many people in Mariupol, Kramatorsk, Slavyansk see this dramatic difference between the new European choice of Ukraine and the so-called People's Republics, separatist republics. Information policy is very important. What we can see on Russian channels is crucified children, young men under 16 being killed, some instances of cannibalism just everywhere in Donetsk. And people tend to believe it. When you start telling them the truth, they cannot believe it. Of course, it's a problem of brainwashing, of information policy, of propaganda, and of anti or counter propaganda. So it hurts me to hear when the Euronews channel, Russian Euronews, call terrorists separatists. It's not about separatism, it's about different things. What we have there are guerrillas, are combatants, are terrorists. It's not an internal conflict, it's an international conflict. And together with our brothers from European countries, together with the guarantor countries, we should ensure that this conflict is completed, is finished as soon as possible.
Mr. Klitschko, your point of view. What You know, in the West and in Russia, everybody was talking about Maidan as the choice of Ukrainians and the issue, first of all, of values and a political issue, but very often this conflict is being conveyed as an ethnic conflict between Ukrainian language and the Russian language people, or some geopolitical war between America and Russia. What is really happening and why the world is talking about Ukrainian situation in a different way? I want to emphasize that Ukrainians were the first who shed blood for their European choice. And in the same way, Ukrainians are defending Ukraine, and not only Ukraine. They are defending the entire Europe. I'm sure that only by joining our forces, our efforts with those countries, democratic countries, modern countries that see the world in peace, the countries they see as independent countries, integral. I am sure that by joining forces and efforts we will be able to stop the aggressor. I am sure that, and I'm also grateful to our partners, that by joining efforts they launched sanctions, and I'm sure that peace now is needed by Ukrainians, by all Ukrainians, and the words peaceful skies become urgent and topical as never before in the entire world. At the moment, peace on Ukrainian soil, by efforts of those patriots who preserve the integrity of Ukraine, who are also giving their lives for the future of our country. The information war, where they try to divide people into Russians and Ukrainians. But what should I do while my mother is from Novosibirsk, from Russia, and my dad is Ukrainian and also have a lot of relatives in Russia, and this information war that's going on regrettably has huge consequences because a lot of people lost their lives. They lost roofs over their heads, they lost their families, and our task today is to show the changes, and the best answer for everyone will be if the reforms in Ukraine are going forwards and they are realized. Ukrainians are expecting this for us. That's why they went to Euromaidan, because they want changes. They do not want to live in a totalitarian state. They want to live in a modern state, and we shall realize this expectation. Assumed responsibility. This is not a simple situation. You know, it's not easy in the mayor's chair. I often joke about this. Many people say that this is a chair. No, this is an electric chair. And knowing the conditions in which the country finds itself, and they are very difficult, but I believe that all the changes will start from Kyiv, and Kyiv will show an example of a European capital, a European city, and we will make a European Ukraine. This is our task. We have forces, we have desire, we are fighting, because without fight, I know this as no one else, there's no victory. Ukraine will be Ukrainian, Ukraine will be European, and Ukrainian as well. Ну що ж, уже пізно, у багатьох людей в руках напої, і це досить така складна ситуація, коли треба говорити про серйозні речі. І зараз у нас наближається закінчення, у нас буде бліц-опитування. Нехай кожна людина у цій групі. Віктор, як завжди, зібрав дуже цікавих західняків, які зацікавлені в Україні. Будь ласка, скажіть, назвіть одну річ, що світ зараз має зробити для України і для Майдану.
Для Майдану.
What do you want to do? Just one word.
The world has to get united and find arguments which will allow to stop this bloodshed. Today it's the battle between economic and democratic values, and my understanding is that democratic values are much higher for the whole Europe. We do understand that sanctions could be painful, but that is needed today to find arguments which the Kremlin will listen to.
I think if you really want to help Ukraine, a real help is sometimes painful. So you need to feel a little pain in order not to feel a big pain later. That's what I think.
I see Commissioner Fula has actually turned red when you said that, so you hit your mark, Sviatoslav. Прошу, пане Klitschko.
Щоб перемогти,
In order to win, everybody knows I came here from boxing, and boxing is very similar to life. Jean-Claude Lelouch said that boxing is one of cruel sports, and it's very like life. So I can say that in order to win, in order to deliver a blow, in order to become a victor, you first of all have to unite, and only together we will be able, by joining our efforts with friends of Ukraine, by joining our efforts of democratic countries, together we will be able to get a result. Our aim is democratic, independent, single Ukraine, united Ukraine. We will achieve this, but at the moment we have to unite everybody. Thank you very much.
Who spoke above a lot of noise and delicious food and wine. Thank you very much.